Yes. Mm, just a second. Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the Coexistence Consortium Coexistence in Practice series. This is hosted by the Coexistence Consortium. Before we start today's talk, let me just give a brief introduction about the organization Coexistence Consortium. What is it about? Then over to the introduction of the speaker further today. The Coexistence Consortium is a network of conservationists, people who are researchers and practitioners from different diverse disciplines. They have all come together to understand this intricate dynamics of coexistence between humans and wildlife. And our mission is extending not just looking at conservation of wild animals confined to the protected areas of these forest pockets, but to a larger extent to living well with nature, even outside the protected areas. So our collective long-term vision is to employ an evidence-based approach to mobilize the concept of human-wildlife coexistence across the globe by focusing and learning from the context-specific projects that we do it in India. You can learn a lot more about us and the work that we do through our social media and just some of the admin stuff regarding today's talk. The structure of the webinar will be the speaker will be speaking for 45 minutes, which will be followed by 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A. So now I'll just hand over to Ravi to do the introduction for Chandrima Home. Thank you.
Thanks, Seema. Good evening, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to welcome and introduce Dr. Chandrima Home, our speaker today. Chandrima grew up in Kolkata. She did her BSc in zoology at Presidency College, then went on to the Wildlife Institute of India to do her master's, where she studied resource utilization by the Indian fox in Kutch, Gujarat for her master's dissertation. She then did her PhD research, which I'm assuming forms the foundation for today's talk. She has, of course, moved on a long way post her PhD. And this was a very challenging, interesting research that she did in the Indian Trans-Himalayas. The ecological and social dimensions of human, dog, wildlife conflict in the Indian Trans-Himalayas. She's currently a faculty member and head of research and collaboration at Shrishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design, and Technology. We just miss it overlapping each other at the Wildlife Institute. I moved on in late 2002, and she should have joined middle of 2003 for her master's. But willy-nilly, we've kind of known each other for more than 20 years now. Including a fairly long train journey from Bangalore to Dehradun to attend the WI alumni meet. Chandrima is a remarkable woman for many good reasons, including taking her year-old daughter into the Indian Trans-Himalayas for the better part of a year when she was doing her field work. And I don't really know of any Indian PhD student doing that. And she also loves baking. So over to you, Chandrima. We're all looking forward to listen to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ravi. Thank you all and those who have joined. Just before I start this talk, I just wanted to share this beautiful picture. And many of you know that this is a very famous movie called Hachiko. And this is a Japanese Akita breed, and it's based on a true story where the dog waited for its master for 9 years, even after his death. And there's a statue of this dog in the Shibuya station in Japan. And in some ways, it shows, it is a reflection of an epitome of loyalty. And this is the way we generally see dogs. But what if we start imagining or start seeing them as an animal within the larger ecological realm? And that's when we see a lot of these interactions coming up. So, can you all see my slide movement? Move this. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, now moving. Yeah.
Now it's moving. Yeah. So my PhD research was largely looked at the ecological and social dimensions of domestic dogs in the Indian Trans-Himalayas. It was a challenging landscape, but it also told very different story of an animal that we generally tend to always regard as a loyal friend and a guide. But here in this landscape, it also said a very different story as well. So if you look at domestic dogs, they are one of the biggest beneficiaries of anthropogenic subsidies. And if you look at our global dog population, it is almost close to 1 million. And in India, we have close to about 60 million dogs. Now, mind you, this is information that is almost a decade before. So this was the data that came out in 2014 in a book that was published by Matthew Gomper, the late Matthew Gomper. He passed away 2 years back, I think. And what essentially it tells you is that dogs across the entire globe is one of the largest, it is one of the most abundant terrestrial carnivore. Whether dogs, despite their association with people, when they are in an ecological space, they are interacting within that space as a predator, as a prey, as disease vectors. They also hybridize with a lot of other species as well, such as wolves and even jackals. So there's a whole lot of interactions that takes place when dogs become a part of this ecological realm. So my PhD research actually focuses on a lot of things, and it looks at the ecological aspects on its impacts on wildlife. And in the context of the Trans-Himalayas, I was looking at several ecological and social aspects as well. But for this talk, I would like to focus on two major aspects. And this is largely looking at the context of livestock depredation and what are some of the ways in which the dogs are changing things within that landscape. So the work is largely, as I said, located within the Upper Spiti landscape, which is a part of the Lahore and Spiti district. It is in the rain shadow of the Pir Panjal range, and in general, this area is extremely sparsely populated. The altitude usually ranges between 3,200 meters to 6,700 meters. So a lot of the areas that you see that is covered in snow are the ones which are completely snow-capped areas and which are of that altitude as well. If we look at the larger landscape, the communities that live are largely Buddhist agro-pastoral communities. They also grow a single cash crop during the summer, and there is a community system of herding that they practice. Now, in the mid-1980s, what exactly happened in this landscape was that green pea was introduced as a cash crop, and that became the principal, crop that started growing over a period of time during the short summer break that they have. So if you look at the production systems that exist within this landscape, there is the herded livestock, which comprises of small and medium-bodied livestock like sheep, goat, donkeys, cattle, and zomo. And then you have the free-ranging livestock, which are large-bodied, such as yaks and horses. In terms of their herding practice, there is a main herder who herds the livestock, and then depending on the kind of animals that is being herded, there are sub herders who help the main herder taking care of these animals. So there is the fanyok for the cattle, the funyok for donkeys, and the rayok for the sheep and goat. In terms of the agriculture, as I mentioned, the major crops are green pea, and of course there is barley. Barley is more like has an extremely cultural importance within the region itself, and therefore green pea and barley are the two major crops. They also grow some potatoes around as well. The Spiti has a very short agricultural season, so a lot of the crops actually grows between April to by September, everything is harvested. And they also have a very unique cultural system, which is called the primogeniture system, where the eldest son gets the land and the eldest daughter gets the turquoise jewelry. And probably this system has emerged to prevent subdivision of land in a space where land is also limited. And in general, if you look at the larger community, there is a community-based decision-making that happens within the landscape. So to take you back through to set the context and what could have led to a lot of things or the changes within the landscape. In between 1996 and 2009, the acreage for green pea grew from 36% to 51%. And as the climate started warming, towards the south of the Upper Spiti, apple started forming its, as an agricultural crop, people started growing apples over there. But what also happened was that tourism over a period of time grew, because in 1991, the tourism policies were relaxed and you didn't need to have an inland pass to get into Spiti. So there was a lot of relaxation of these tourism policies, because of which the infrastructure for tourism started building up. So by the time it was, the data from 2018 management plan says that Kaza, which is the main township, has almost close to 130 restaurants. But so basically the space grew, tourism expanded, and what really happened was that the dog populations also started growing, and in some ways started stabilizing within the landscape as well, because of the huge amount of food that was made available to them. Now, the questions that we wanted to ask was how and why dogs prey on livestock. And the two predictions that we wanted to really look at was the fact that the dogs were killing livestock within the landscape. Did it respond to more dogs being present, or did it respond to more livestock being present? So these were the two principal questions that we wanted to ask. And we also wanted to know the kind of economic losses that the people were facing in terms of livestock depredation. So essentially, what we did was each village became a place of our sampling effort. And we looked at several things within these villages. So we looked at dog abundances through photographic mark recapture. We looked at the sizes of these villages, where the garbage dumps were, and the area that they occupied within the village. What was the livestock numbers? We also did structured interviews to understand the herding practices of people, and also the kind of livestock that was, the numbers of livestock or the kind of livestock that was lost to dogs. At the end of the year, we did something called a key herder interviews across 29 villages within the landscape to kind of figure out how many livestock was being lost at a village level. And we also tried to understand the average annual sale price of all these animals that were there within the landscape. So when we looked at the structured interviews that we did, out of the 287 people that we could interview, we reported 238 livestock mortalities. And it was found that 80% of the animals that were being killed by dogs were largely small-bodied livestock. But they also targeted medium-bodied livestock such as donkeys. So there were a couple of donkeys also that were being killed. When we looked at the ways and the number of livestock that were being killed in different parts of the village, we essentially could see somewhat like a trend, where during across a season we could see a trend, and also the places where they were being killed. So during winters, the mortality was the lowest, but by the time it was autumn, the dogs killed the maximum amount of livestock, especially around the agricultural fields. We also found that a lot of these depredations that took place. Sorry, can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, sorry. So a lot of the depredations that happened in presence of herders, and they were also happening during broad daylight. So they were all happening during the day. Unfortunately, I'm again not able to move my slide. 1 second. Yeah. And when we tried to look at this relationship between what really impacted livestock depredation by dogs, we found that of the two predictions that we had, the depredation pattern by dogs responded more to the total livestock, to the livestock numbers that were being killed, rather than the number of dogs that were present, which essentially meant that the second prediction that we had put out, whether the livestock depredation by dogs were responding more to livestock or more to dogs, they were responding more to the livestock population that was around them. Now, at the end, when we did the key herder interviews, we recorded almost close to 441 cases for the year 2013-14. And almost 77% of these depredations were caused by the carnivores, of which the dogs were the maximum. Now, if you look at the valuation of the loss, you will see that the dogs are almost comparable to that of snow leopards. Now, the reason behind this was the dogs killed a lot more animals, but smaller sized animals, whereas snow leopards largely restricted to killing larger animals, which were more expensive. What we also found out was that the total loss that the people were facing in terms of livestock depredation overall was close to 30 lakhs, and dogs nearly contributed 40% of this loss per household per year. So if we look at the context of livestock depredation, essentially some of the things that come evidently are the fact that the abundance of livestock becomes the key determinant of predation. We also see a seasonal trend in the depredation where during winters, the depredation is the lowest. And then by the time it's like summer, the dogs probably starts tracking the livestock that move out into the pastures. In peak summer, tourism is all the places which are hotels and restaurants are all open. So it's peak tourism season. So probably at that point in time, the dogs are restricted more towards these restaurants where they get a large part of their food. And by the time it's like autumn, when animals are kept around agricultural fields to manure their fields, that's when a lot of the depredations also starts happening. It is important to understand here that depredations took place despite the herders being present. And a lot of the times when we spoke to the herders, they would say that, it's a pack of almost close to 15, 20 dogs. And it's very difficult for one or two herders to actually drive these dogs away from the space as well. What is important to understand here is that, of course, although the economic loss by dogs is comparable to snow leopards, because it's a domestic animal killing people's livestock, there is no compensation. So imagine the amount of economic losses that the people were being subjected to because of this whole problem of dogs killing people's livestock in that landscape. So what was important to understand was that now that we know that the dogs were going and killing livestock, and that too in such large numbers, are these linkages shifting? And what is happening to these interconnections between agriculture and livestock rearing within the landscape itself? And for this, essentially what we really tried to understand was, what were the kind of livestock trends that we were looking at, say, for the last 1 decade. We also wanted to identify what were the reasons of these change for livestock, if any, that was happening. What were the impacts of change on agricultural inputs? And if this problem continues, how would people envision this in future, specifically in this context? And what we did was, we did a semi-structured interviews across 27 villages. And these were in-depth interviews that we conducted, which had several questions that looked at these pointers that I put out for you. And we also, at the same time, looked at secondary information on livestock population for 1987 and 2003. And this came from the Upper Spiti Management Plan that was published in 2011. And what we also tried to do is we tried to compare these livestock population numbers across these 3 temporal zones. So when we did these interviews, it was kind of important for us that we cover almost a substantial part of the village. So almost 30 to 40% of the households were covered. We interviewed 1 person within these. And along with that, we also made a lot of personal observations, and we discussed with the villagers and the larger herders with whom we sought help when we had to collect information about livestock damage by dogs. And when you have certain questions, while there were certain questions which were in the form of binaries where you could deduct what the answers could be, the open-ended questions in these semi-structured interviews also had themes that emerge. So at the end, we used around 256 interviews, information from 256 interviews to kind of understand what was happening within the landscape. So from this section of the work, we saw that almost 72% of the respondents reported a decline in livestock population between 2003 and 2013. And when we compared this with the livestock information that we had for both 1987 and 2003 and 2003 and 13, we could also see this change where there was a larger decline within the landscape between 2003 and 13. So especially the last one decade. And when we looked at these numbers, it was almost like a 44% decline. And if we look at how these trends were for the different livestock species, while we saw an increase in the numbers for larger livestock, we saw a decline in the numbers for horses and donkeys, which already had started declining in the early 2000 itself. But the most drastic decline that we saw was for the small-bodied livestock, mainly the sheep and goat. So 59% of the respondents did not have any small-bodied livestock when we interviewed within the landscape. And for 40% of this change happened in the last 5 years. Almost 25% of the respondents had not kept any small-bodied livestock for more than a decade. And those that maintained small-bodied livestock saw close to 50 to 75% decline in the number of households that were maintaining these within a village. And when it came to the reasons of why they declined, one of the most frequent reasons of decline stated, especially in the last one decade, was livestock depredation by dogs. And this was followed by challenges in herding, reduction in fodder, as well as depredation by wild carnivores like wolves and snow leopards. And along with this, there were a few other reasons which was also mentioned, where they were looking at how the machinery had reduced, which required certain kinds of livestock earlier. And now with the tractors coming into the picture, a lot of that demand also for certain kind of livestock had reduced. And there were effects also on other crops. So when people grew apples, in order to save their apple saplings from being destroyed, they removed the small-bodied livestock from that village as well. And there were also kinship changes. So basically when people within their cultural, within the culture of Spiti itself, when families move from what we call as the Khangjin to Kinjung, the people owning these livestock also changed. The number of livestock people owned also changed. If we look at the manure inputs within the landscape, a lot of the manure actually comes from the dry pit toilet or the chaksa, along with the livestock manure that is there. This is for the agriculture, for the green pea cultivation that they have. When we asked the respondents, almost 44% confirmed that they would access manure from different sources. And over a period of time, what came up was that between 1998 to 2008, there was a government scheme that was launched, which was called the Nautor, which helped add additional land area within this landscape for cultivation. But what people also mentioned that in the last 4 to 5 years, the quantum of this manure requirement had also increased. Now, this is just a map which kind of shows how the different kinds of manure moves within the landscape. So you have a set of villages in the north, which you can see enclosed within the green box. They are the villages which have access to the Gaddi grazing area. So the Gaddis are basically migratory pastoralists. They move from the lower part of the Himachal to these high altitude pastures, specifically during summers. And basically they have a pact with these villages and the areas that they can use. So the pact basically says that you allow these people to graze their livestock, but then the people can have access to the manure. So a lot of these villages they have access to the manure from the Gaddi grazing areas. And there are some villages which actually access, again, these manure, but they have to, because they don't have that pact with the Gaddis, because they don't use their pastures, they pay their logistic cost if they have to get the manure from some of these areas. But there's also a lot of inter-manure movement that takes place within the landscape as well. So the villages that you can see, so there are villages that are marked in yellow. Now these are the villages which are higher up within the in the mountains, whereas the ones which are in pink are near the valley, on the valley of the Spiti River, along the Spiti River. And there is a lot of manure movement that happens towards the south, where apple is also being grown. And you can, as you can also see, that there are other sources of manure that has started coming into the landscape as well. So there's vermicompost, cow dung that comes in from Kullu, Mandi, Sundarnagar, and there's also manure coming in from Ladakh, Leh. So this is just a map showing how manure moves within the landscape itself. Now, when it came to livestock depredation, almost 60% of these respondents experience livestock losses by dogs in the last 5 years, and 48% of them perceived dogs as very high threat within the landscape. And when we asked them about whether they would want to keep small-bodied livestock in the near future, in the next 10 years to come, almost 42% of the respondents said that they would not want to keep them. And this is just a quotation from one of the respondents who mentioned that how damaging they are than snow leopards and wolves. Because in case of snow leopards, at least they will take one wild animal, but when the dogs come, they are literally on a hunting spree. So there are several challenges to livestock herding in Spiti, and I'll list down some of these key challenges that exist at present. Of course, there is very, very heavy depredation of dogs, specifically for small livestock within the landscape. And when I was finishing up my field work, we also saw this emerging pattern where dogs started going and killing calves of the larger animals, such as yak calves and zomo calves, in and around the village. So a lot of the yak that is out there in this landscape is free ranging. So basically, the dogs have started killing these yak calves whenever they are there, whenever they are birthing. So that is there. Most importantly, there has been a lot of social ecological changes that has happened within the landscape. The place has grown, tourism has increased, and therefore a lot of the traditional patterns of herding animals have become very difficult in this landscape. So currently, at present, the non-availability of exclusive herders for small livestock has become a very big problem. Now, when I was mentioning about the reduction in the number of households, almost 50 to 75% of the households maintaining small-bodied livestock, it is important to understand over here one thing, that the Ryok, which is the sub-herder for the sheep and the goat, actually comes from these households which have sheep and goat. Now, when you have, and it is basically on a turn-by-turn basis. So when you have smaller number of households maintaining these small-bodied livestock, the turn for a sub-herder to help a main herder comes much more frequently. And it becomes like a logistical problem for them. Many a times, the main herder is also hired for the summer from outside. So there's a lot of influx of people coming in from Bihar, from Nepal, who are actually hired as herders for the summer. As many of them mention, it becomes only practicable when a certain percentage of households starts maintaining the small stock so that their turn does not come too frequently. And over a period of time, what we essentially saw was this trend towards keeping larger livestock. And in 2009, there was a Doodh Ganga Yojana that was started, so kind of promoted the dairy business, because of which people also started increasing their large-bodied livestock. And of course, when you have free-ranging livestock in these pastures, they also have an agreement, which is called the doxa. And sometimes, many a times, there are problems in reviving this doxa for the free-ranging livestock itself. So just to kind of take you through a whole glimpse of what really happened within the landscape, and we've looked at socioeconomic changes and we've looked at agro-pastoral changes. So in the mid 1970s to mid 1980s, overall connectivity within Upper Spiti was extremely poor. It was more like a subsistence economy that was maintained. And you had agriculture was largely the black pea, which is a traditional pea variety, barleys and potatoes. And you had the livestock, and each would feed into each other. There were traditional forms of herding, and agriculture was practiced at a more subsistence level. by the time it came to mid-1980s to mid-1990s, green tea was introduced in the mid-80s, and then people started channelizing this as a cash crop, and therefore the markets opened up. There was also growth of the government sector that happened within the landscape. So offices opened up in Gaza. There was a hydel power project in Rangrik, which also hired a lot of people. The tourism policies were relaxed, and tourism started growing within the landscape itself. So, but we were still, it was still moving from a subsistence to a cash economy. But still, we didn't really see the problems of dogs within that landscape at that point in time. When we come to the mid-1990s to the 2000, at that time, as you can see, a lot of changes had happened already. And basically, you had government policies that encouraged more green peas and other horticultural plants such as apple, apricots. There was increasing connectivity to markets. Tourism boomed, and there was a lot of infrastructure that was built around tourism. And that's when the dogs started increasing in numbers, and there was an initial increase at that. The initiation of depredation started. And as you can also see that there was an increase in the demand for manure, so livestock populations also increased. And therefore, by the time it was mid-1990s to early 2000s, Spiti had a completely cash-based economy that was running. And from 2003 to till 2014, till the time I collected my information, what we were seeing was how the depredation by dogs had increased to such an extent that they were a big problem. They were a threat for the local communities. Overall, larger livestock population declines were observed. Increase in green pea acreage, there was growth of apple, and although because livestock population were decreasing and the agricultural growth was happening, manure started coming in from other sources because of the increased demand. And then we could also see how the improved economy affected the traditional herding patterns, and households started reducing or they stopped keeping small-bodied livestock and started hiring herders for the summer. So this is like the entire trajectory of what Spiti went through from the mid-1970s till about 2015, 2014, 2015, and more changes happening even now. So considering the fact that how things have happened within the landscape, we envision these two specific trajectories that could bring in the changes in the linkages that we are looking at. So in the first scenario, although the economic growth of the space has happened, people have, because of the cash-driven economy, people have money. So therefore, they can either hire more herders and therefore increase or maintain their small-bodied livestock, or they could reduce their small-bodied livestock, add more larger livestock, and diversify their manure access. The important thing is that we see both these scenarios happening within the landscape at this point in time as well. But here, the problem is that in both these cases, it is intricately linked with the population management of dogs. And unless that happens, whichever scenario we are in, it's really not going to work in favor for the people. So to conclude, what we see here is like we have seen an overall decline in the livestock population in the last 10 years. And domestic dogs are one of the key reasons for this decline and has been perceived as high threat by the local communities themselves. We see several challenges in livestock rearing, and we also start seeing changes that have started happening in these agro-pastoral linkages. But what is important is the fact that when we look at India as a country, we are living with a common carnivore. The dogs are all around us. And how do we really tackle the burgeoning population that we see around ourselves? And to be very frank, I'm not sure whether I have any answers for this. But what is important is the fact that we know what really led to this problem. And this is all speculative because we don't have information about dogs 20, 25 years ago. Nobody really went and collected dog data for cities, for villages across India. But what happened in the late 1990s and early 2000 was that in India saw a massive decline in vulture populations. And vultures, as you know, are the scavenging community. So any livestock that is there, the vultures will eat them, and they are a cleaning, they are basically very important ecosystem services within a landscape because they clean up the system. Now, when the vulture decline happened, it opened up the niche for dogs. And that's when dog populations grew. And at the same time, there were rules and regulations that were imposed where sterilization was proposed as the only methods of control. And over a period of time, say in the last almost 25 years, we've seen these increasing number of conflict that has been happening with wildlife and humans because dogs are a public health problem. And of course, as you see the recent Supreme Court ruling that has come up, it also completely ignores the general ecology of dogs within a space. So when we look at the human-dog interface, it is a very complex socio-ecological system and it is rife with conundrums. There are no easy answers for this. And there are several issues that are there. And this was something that came up in a recent paper by Lambertucci. And these issues still remain. There is unclear legislation. India doesn't have a responsible dog ownership policy. Any dog owner can abandon any pet on the streets and he or she will never be questioned for it. Most people don't even want to keep dogs in their houses as pets, so they are mostly free roaming. There's also a lot of intentional and unintentional feeding that happens for dogs. And when there is no accountability for the larger sterilization process, you have a lot of food, animals are not being sterilized, and therefore they are increasing in numbers. We also have limitation of shelters for them. And of course, more importantly, there are power asymmetries that are there between the different stakeholders. And perhaps while this looks very, it's like an ideal situation it is the way forward for all of us, finding this way forward and finding this whole connection of how you build strong institutions, you build in science, you build in management and the legislation to kind of tackle dog population management requires a lot of effort and perhaps more a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down one and somebody telling you that, next day, please shift all the dogs to shelters and all the problem will be solved. So in general, if you look at this whole system, even with a relationship with a dog, it's changing a lot in India. And it's important for us to understand why it is changing as well. And although we may not have clear solutions at this point in time, understanding why these changes happen makes it more easier to take some steps perhaps ahead. And with that, I will end. And I would like to thank my doctoral advisory committee at ATRI and MAHE, where I did my PhD from, Nature Conservation Foundation, who were a really big part of this PhD because I worked in Spiti as well. And my funding agency is the International Foundation for Science, Department of Science and Technology Women Scientist Grant, the Miriam Rothschild Fellowship and SCCS Cambridge for funding a lot of this work. And of course, in Spiti, I cannot be less thankful about the people who have been there, the local residents, the field staff, and people who've really opened their homes for me when I was doing my interviews, the Himachal Pradesh Forest Department and friends, colleagues, and family. And I'm happy to take questions from you. I'll just stop sharing my screen if that's okay.
Hi. Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you.
But I can't see myself, so I was like, I'm a little confused that
Okay.
that something is wrong. That's what happened. Thank you, Chandrima. Thank you for this lovely talk. And it went from what one part that was really touching for me personally was this 1950, 1980, this whole the historical, looking at it from a history perspective and what legislation, what policies have changed, and because of
Yes.
which a lot of things have happened on the ground, which
Yeah.
a lot of time when we make policy changes, we do not know the ramifications of these policy changes till the next 50 years or 100 years, and then you know that. It was really,
Yes.
really fascinating to see that. Anyone has any questions, you can either unmute yourself and or else ask in the chat box. I think everybody is taking some time just to think about it, and
Yeah,
because
you can take your time and think about it.
yeah.
I guess it will take some
Yes.
time to, you can let it sink in a bit.
Okay. Yeah. We do not. Let's see if we have any questions. I don't know. Hmm. Yes, go ahead, Sanjana.
Hi,
I think,
Chandrima.
hi.
Can you
I
hear me?
think Ravi wanted me to share the one slide before this. So I'm just trying to get back to that slide. I don't know how do I get back to my previous slide? It says the way forward.
Don't worry, don't worry.
Don't
You
worry.
carry on.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Sanjana.
So I had two questions. One was the seasonal pattern that you mentioned.
Yeah.
What I have kind of always heard is that since the tourism kind of disappears in the winter, winter is when there's most depredation by dogs, but your graph showed that it had the least. So I just wanted to check that that's because all the livestock themselves are not accessible, like they're inside
Yes. So in
enclosures.
winter, most of the time they are herded. Okay. And so many a times they are taken, but they are mostly herded inside. So there's a lot more protection. So what happens during winters is that the dogs, they may not have access to too much of livestock, but they have access to all the wildlife. So they are hunting down blue sheep, they hunt down ibex. So that's exactly what happens during the peak winters. And dogs, like, they are in really large packs, and the blue sheep and when it is really deep snow, it's very difficult for blue sheep also to sometimes run in that snow. So many of the times they fall prey to dogs. So yeah,
Oh,
that's the
okay.
problem that happens. So yes, livestock is herded many a times inside, especially when there is snowfall. They are taken out to be
Mm-hmm.
herded. So they are penned and they are stall fed at that point in time. But the free ranging livestock, unless there is very heavy rain, snowfall, or there is a cultural function like they have the New Year, which is called the Losar. So during that time, that's when they get the free ranging livestock back into their villages. But most of the time, free ranging livestock like horses and yak, they are all out. They are not within the villages at all. They are all free ranging almost all times of the year.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And I had one more question. So when you were doing the interviews, since dogs were, I mean, clearly such a big problem for the people living there, did they have any suggestions or opinions on how they thought the dog population should be controlled? And was that different from people who are not herders, maybe who might not have, as negative opinions about dogs?
So, yeah, it's a tough question. If you look at culturally as a space, it's a Buddhist community. They have very different views about the whole idea of what is sentient beings for them. The whole idea of a dog in its next life is a human being. All these things matter a lot. And it's not that people have not taken steps over there, but the thing is that uh, for them, yes, they face losses. One of the most common things that I have heard back many a times from them is, हाँ मारते हैं लेकिन क्या करें, हमको भी भेड़ बकरी रखना पड़ता है, लेकिन we have stopped, many of us have stopped. So that's the thing. But it is a very difficult situation. There has been some camps that was done for sterilization as well. In fact, when I was working there, NCF, along with animal husbandry, they conducted a set of sterilization programs for a few of the villages. And but the thing is, catching some of these dogs, especially that go inside these pastures, is not an easy task. So the dogs which are in and around villages maybe can be more easily caught than the ones which are actually going and hunting livestock. It is also important to understand here that the the entire population of dogs is not interested in wildlife depredation at all. It's only a subset of these dogs which are going and doing this. It's not the whole. So catching, the important thing is to have them be caught and maybe move them from that, because most of them have already tasted livestock, have already tasted wildlife, and it's a very difficult situation. And it is a problem that is still going on. It's not that it's stopped. It is still continuing.
So the ones that most need to be caught are the ones that are hardest to catch,
Yes,
right? Okay.
yes. That differential probability between the dogs in terms of catching them that's the biggest issue.
Okay. Thank you so much, Anjali.
Yeah.
A really nice talk.
I think there are a couple of questions on the chat.
There are like a lot of questions in the chat. Do you want me to read it out, Chandrima, for you?
Yeah,
I'll
sure.
read it out for you.
Yeah.
This is a question by Ankita. Thanks for the wonderful insights. What is the name of the pastoral community you worked with? And if you could share a bit more about what the Nothab, I don't know how
Nautor scheme.
scheme is.
Nautor. So basically, I work with the local agro-pastoralist community. They are so you have the migratory ones who are the gaddis, but these are not the ones who migrate. They are the people living within that landscape who herd animals on a daily basis. They take them to the pastures, they come back with them. So they are the communities that live over there. These are all scheduled tribes who are there mostly in these villages. The Nautor scheme was a part of the government. It was a part of I think one of the part of the tribal plan that was mentioned, where the scheme was introduced to basically give land to the landless. That's how the Nautor scheme came in place within Spiti. So it was a way of bringing the land to the landless. So and that basically helped increasing land for agriculture as well. So it was a government scheme that was introduced within the landscape around, I think, 1998.
Okay. Moving forward, Priyanshu asks, are the people of village didn't have shepherd dogs for protection? He's thinking that is there like a dogs
Yeah,
for
so the thing
protection?
is that, the thing is the dogs, there are dogs around villages also. So when there are animals that come into villages, these dogs will sensitize people that, okay, there may be a wild animal coming in. But the people in general who are within this, who are the communities living within this landscape, unlike the Gaddis who have shepherd dogs going with and moving with the whole group of livestock, it is not like that here. They don't have dogs to look after livestock. And this is also a question that I asked them, that whether they would want to keep dogs to look after their livestock itself. But that association has to start from the time that when the dog is a pup versus even when the goat and sheep are young. So having that, these people have never had dogs to look after their livestock, and therefore introducing that within the landscape also might take a while. They may not take it. It also depends on the fact that livestock is herded in the pastures, and again they come back home. At the end of the day, they are all coming back home. But yeah, it is also a question that I had asked them, and they had never herded their livestock with dogs. So it's only the Gaddis or the other migratory, so Dhangars in the south, in Maharashtra and in parts of Karnataka, the Dhangars, they also have dogs. They move with dogs and livestock. So mostly the migratory pastoralists use dogs as protectors, but not this community.
Moving forward, there's a question by Aritri. So she's asking from which data source we can avail livestock register data online and offline. And if I if I want these for South West Bengal? So,
This was collected as a part of the management plan. So this involved, so the data from 1987 and 2003 was published information within the management plan for Spiti. That was that was for Spiti. But in general, we have something called the livestock census that happens every 5 years. That is freely available. So the livestock census gives an idea about livestock numbers every 5 years within the country. Any state you pick up, you can get livestock numbers. They may not be the best. I can that much I can mention, but I don't know how this data is collected. Probably through door-to-door counts or something like that. But how many doors they are going to count, and all those numbers make a lot of difference. So there is livestock animal husbandry department. They do this livestock census. In fact, dogs are also a part of that census every 5 years, but they are mostly pet dogs, and I'm not sure whether they count the stray dogs. But livestock, every 5 years there is a number that is put for different species of livestock across all states within India.
thank you, Chandrima. There are quite a bit of questions, so just
Yeah.
giving you an update.
Yeah, that's fine. I knew it.
Jayashree is asking, are these dogs all abandoned domestic dogs that then form packs? And if yes, what makes people abandon these dogs?
No, I mean, there's nothing about abandonment. It's just, they were never dogs which were owned by people. They were just like the way you see dogs around you on the streets. These are the dogs within that landscape. The interesting thing about dog packs, especially what I saw when I was working there, is that these are not the way wolves packs operate. Okay. The wolf packs are known to each other. So a lot of the animals within the wolf pack, they are the daughters, the sons, the cousins, and everybody. But in the case of the dogs, it's a fission fusion group, most of the cases. So when these dogs would form these packs, every pack would actually be comprised of different dogs, barring a few, which would be, kind of leading the group. And it's actually fascinating to see that dynamics within such a common animal like a dog. And I am still fascinated to see these dogs even in cities as to how they interact also, through their barks, through their calls, the way there are certain barks for certain kinds of things. So so basically these are all fission fusion groups that come, get together, hunt, and go. That's it. They disintegrate those packs. It's not that those packs remain the same. So these are not abandoned dogs at all. I mean, nobody's really keeping a pet dog there. And even the concept of keeping a pet dog in a place like Spiti is like the dogs are free roaming. They are there moving all around the house and not tied up. So there is no abandonment per se over here. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the answer. Now there's a question by Paul. It's quite a bit of a long question, so I'll just read it out.
Sure.
From what I see online, no funds have been allocated for ABC program for the last 4 years, coupled with the stupid SC rulings. I don't know why is this. Many of the non-governmental organizations I work with find trouble finding funding for their spaying and neutering programs. Even earlier, the funds allocated was barely enough to spay and neuter a few hundred animals, or in bracket a few lakhs. Why do people advocate for committing a genocide against this feral population instead of advocating for ABC funding?
See, what is feral? I'll ask the question. Okay. What do you mean by feral? When you look at in an ecological term, the word feral means that any so-called domestic animal that becomes feral completely gets its food from the wild. Okay. But in case of dogs, it's not. No matter how much a dog will go out and hunt, it is still associated with a household, with a person, with a village to come back for food. So this whole concept of what is feral is questionable. So I never use the word feral. I will always use the word free-ranging because that gives a better perspective. A dog can be a pet, but can be still free-ranging and having impacts. It's a very difficult question. Genocide is not something which is possible. in the sense that legally it becomes too binding. A lot of changes have happened in the animal birth control rules as well. 25 years ago, technically dog populations were controlled by poisoning, strychnine poisoning. And I've heard that in Spiti also. They would just give these strychnine tablets to dogs. All the older, sick dogs, rabid dogs, distemper dogs, they would kill off in that way and maintain their numbers. What has happened over a period of time is that euthanasia is not something that is considered a welfare tool in India. But there is also a problem to that. The problem is, in today's world, people are going to misuse euthanasia also. The kind of situation that we have come up to, if you are going to have such kind of rules, people are going to misuse it. Misuse it not just for populations which are harming wildlife, but populations that don't also. So there are pros and there are cons. So ABC funding is a big problem. The biggest issue about ABC is the accountability. If ABC was done well, and if ABC was done for the last 25 years properly, we would not have to see this, to be very frank. Because when ABC is also extremely, in terms of its resources, it's very expensive, right? It's a lot of taxpayers' money that is going in. It's not that government doesn't have money for ABC. It has. It's the lack of accountability that is there. There are people who will take in money. There's huge amounts of corruption. So you take the money for ABC. It takes about 1350 to 1550 for a dog to be sterilized. That's the cost per dog. Sterilization cost per dog. So if you have 100 dogs, and the sign for sterilizing them is what? Cutting off the ears or clipping them. You can clip off, do nothing, take the money, and that's it. The dogs are not sterilized, but you have said on paper that you have sterilized. And that's exactly what is happening even till now. So there are very few organizations that are actually working in terms of properly doing these sterilization programs. But the larger, many of them, the larger dogs, I mean, if you look at citywide sterilization programs, how many cities will you find actual organizations doing it properly, without any corruption, without any problem, taking accountability of every step that they? That's the thing. That data, that information is never available to any of us. You'll have it in numbers in papers. ABC gives money to this organization. So many dogs have to be sterilized. But what is it coming from that organization? So yes, it is a tough situation. And as I said, a lot of people ask me, what is the solution for this? There are no solutions. I can guarantee that. One cannot have a solution in what has happened over 25 years and think that in a year, in 2 years' time, everything will vanish. It doesn't happen that way. And it also requires a lot of community action. It requires strong dog ownership rules. As I said, any owner, even in Bangalore, there are so many dogs abandoned on the streets. Nobody hauls up any of these owners for abandoning dogs on the streets. Anybody who's feeding a dog, why can't you take care of it in terms of sterilizing it, giving it vaccine? It's all about, also revolves around the larger context of what we call as dog ownership. If you go to Europe, if you go to any of the places in Australia, do you see any free-ranging dogs? No, you don't, because they are short. If a person has a pet dog and that pet dog is out 2 kilometers within the radius outside, you can have a microchip, you can have a collar, but your dog is outside my territory. I'm going to shoot outside and in my territory, and I'm going to shoot it. I'm not saying to have that level of laws, but at least strengthen them for proper ownership within India. I mean, look around you and look around the people who maintain dogs. A lot of things will come once you start observing this. So yes, there are some cases where dogs need to be removed. If you see dogs, say, in the places like where the Great Indian Bustards are, very specific rare species where the dogs have the propensity to go and kill these animals, yes, they should be removed. But then the the problem that happens in India is that you have just two polarized sections. There's one which will look at animal welfare only through the lens of the dogs, and then there's one which is, I'm going to beat the hell out of the dog and give it the most terrible death ever. Why can't we think of spaces which are more in the middle path? Why can't we advocate science-based management? Why can't we look at why are we not looking at waste management within cities? There are things that have to be done in tandem. It cannot happen that I sterilize a vaccinated dog and I don't do anything about waste. I don't do anything about people's consumption patterns. I don't do anything about feeding. I don't do anything about shelters. It doesn't happen that way, unfortunately. Yeah. I hope that answered your question. I'm not sure.
Thank you. Thank you for the elaborate answer. And I hope, Paul, it answered your question. Moving forward to Chetana, a nice study with new insights. Is there any vulture species around in the study area that feeds on livestock carcass if the communal disposal site exists? If not, how livestock carcass disposal in that region?
So livestock carcasses, when I was there, a lot of it is mostly thrown near the rivers. There was no proper disposal mechanism that was technically there. All these dead livestock actually fed the dogs during winters. There are vulture populations. So there is lemurgear and there is Himalayan griffon vultures, which are there. Along with vultures, there's also golden eagle. There are a few other larger raptors as well. So they are there. But yeah, a lot of the livestock, actually during the winters, the livestock that die and is disposed of just like that becomes food for the dogs. So technically there isn't much of a mechanism. I don't know what is happening at this point in time, but the time when I was working, the carcasses would be put near the river and the dogs would feed on it or the birds would feed on it, whichever. Yeah. There were no specific sites. Like there were sites near the river, that's all. But there was nothing done per se.
Thank you. Prajwal, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah. Hi, this is Prajwal Kumar. I work for Center for Business Leadership on Nature Restoration for United Nations Global Compact Network India. So thank you for your elaborate answer on dog sterilization and euthanization. Like it covered everything, and it was good to hear a good sense with explanation and with very nice reasoning, which a large part of Indians doesn't understand. My question will go beyond your topic, I guess. So I was more interested into knowing the current and future scenarios. So as we all know that herder communities are declining all over the world day by day, and this poultry kind of farming is getting increased, and due to the advent of roads in interior regions, it has become more accessible, right? So, and everybody also at the same time wants to be a millionaire, right, in this capitalist scene. So, how do you see the future aspirations of the young a population which is left in the villages of those remote locations? And like, what is the course? What they see as a viable option for achieving a wealthy livelihood for themselves, and like, yeah, how they see future for them, and what they are doing for themselves right now. Thank you.
Tough question. I'll try my best to answer. Yes, the younger generation, they do move out for education, for jobs. But if you look at the population that is there in Spiti, they are also a secure population in terms of the tribal communities themselves. So tourism has given a lot of options to the younger generation as well. So many a times they do go and they may also come back to the place. Difficult to say how this will pan out, because when we look at some of the variables, there are several things within it. So what is it that aspiration means for someone who is there in the mountains? Is it quality education, or is it opportunities, or is it more than that? So, and I think that is also something that will differ within the population themselves. Yes, we do see a decline in traditional patterns, in traditional ecological knowledge, the kind of things that the older generation would know about livestock rearing, about the way of life. That is not getting, it's not getting transferred to the younger generation so much. People are losing that touch. But I really don't know how to answer it more than this, because it is also very variable for different communities. So I don't know. I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer. There are aspirations, and people do move out for their aspirations, but there have been many who come back also to do something for their village. And I think the community system within this landscape is very unique, which we don't see in cities and in other spaces. Urban populations, the sense of community is very different from some of these people. There's a lot of community-based decision making. There's a lot of social support systems that gets built up through these. So what you call as a social capital, it's a very important thing for these people living in these harsh landscapes, because they live in such challenging situations, that social support is very important for them as human beings, and therefore they actually really hold on to that to a large extent. So for them, the community matters a lot. The decision makings within the community as a whole matters for them, which of course over a period of time may disintegrate, I don't know. But till the time I have been there, it's a very different feeling altogether, living in the hills, working in the mountains, talking to people who are living over there. They are very different from people living in cities, because their challenges are much, much more. So I don't know how much I've really answered your question, but I've tried to.
No, thank you. That was a lot. Like, yeah, it will be a long going question. Like people,
Yeah.
like it is a hard thing to like see the
And the
future,
people in
right?
the mountains are also seeing the change, right? The larger context of
Yeah.
climate change that is happening within that space, where certain, rainfall which never happened at certain times of the year, extreme snowfall, all these things are happening. People are seeing those changes even within their landscape as well. So there could be, but then where do they go? They know that this is their land. That's also there. And as a
Yeah.
person from outside, I cannot go and live over there buying a place. Himachal does not allow people, outsiders, like unlike other places, Himachal does not allow people from outsiders to buy land and settle over there. They can give on lease,
True.
but you won't be able
True.
to buy land and be there. So it is their land. Yeah.
Thanks. I had recently visited Demul.
Oh, Demul,
You
okay.
might know.
It's a very beautiful village.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the social capital you said, that was seen in the, like, as a tourist, I stayed in somebody's home, but I paid to the community, and the things are
Exactly.
really great
That's
in
the
that
thing.
terms.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
great listening to you. It was
Thank
an
you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think there are some more
Yeah,
questions.
thank you, Prachur, for this.
Thanks a lot.
So yeah, first of all, just Sanjana has pointed out that about the dogs attacking people, there's a documentary called Key and
Yes.
on YouTube. So please do watch it if you haven't watched it yet, everyone. I'm just going a little quicker with the questions just for the interest of time. Then
Yes.
Priyanshu has asked, can't we change the predatory nature of those dogs by providing some feeding points in the area other than sterilization?
So it is something that is being tried out, but feeding points and not sterilizing is not going to help. Even if you feed, you still have to sterilize so that they don't grow in their numbers. But another important thing is, even if you feed them, it's also that instinct that dogs have, right? Because they have evolved from the wolves. Even if you feed them, they may still have that instinct to go and hunt. So it's a difficult thing. No one doesn't know. But feeding without sterilization is not a great idea at all. If it has to be done, it has to be done with the sterilization program as well.
There's a question by Himani. Hi, Dr. Chandrima. Great work and great presentation. I have a question on the participation on Forest Department. How can they contribute in conservation of local wildlife in Spiti? And when it comes to wildlife feral dog conflicts, this whole dog conflict that we're looking at, what is their general approach?
I think the Himachal Pradesh Forest Department has had a wonderful, you know, collaboration with Nature Conservation Foundation. So it's a really an amazing example of how a forest department sets out intricate plans for managing the landscape and looking at various aspects of it. So I think also the long-term work that NCF has been doing through their high altitude program is also incredibly commendable, because it also requires that kind of an engagement for literally more than 2 decades. They have been engaging with the people, the forest department, and the problems within their landscape. So they work in tandem with the high altitude program. So it's a wonderful collaboration that they have. I don't know about the other spaces within Himachal, but in general, I think NCF has also been camera trapping in several places within Himachal itself, and not just only Spiti for snow leopards. So yes, these problems are emerging, and I think as a department, particularly, it may be difficult for me to say how they deal with it, but I think when a department collaborates with an organization which is heavily research and science-based, I think that makes a lot of difference. So I think maybe through these mechanisms only one can figure out. I mean, I remember when we were doing the sterilization camps, or when we were doing the dog population counts, I had a lot of support from the forest department themselves. They were proactive. They knew what the problem was. But it is not the purview of the forest department to look at domestic animals. Is also something that you need to understand. The domestic animals are largely, like, you have these categorizations within India. Whose responsibility is it? Who am I responsible for? So the forest department is technically responsible for the wildlife, but the animal husbandry is responsible for the domestic species. Now, where does domestic dog falls into this? So most of the animal husbandry people are also associated with looking more at the livestock perspective rather than the dogs or the cats. Now, it is also that, as I said, when I was talking, the kind of hierarchies that you see for different stakeholders. Where do certain things fit and which things don't fit within that? And something just slips away because of this whole confusion and conundrum that happens as to whose responsibility is it.
We have a last question by Tapasya, until and unless we have any more questions that come in. But Tapasya has a question. Good evening. I found the session to be quite interesting. I just wanted to know if the people of Spiti are as fearful of their own safety as they are for the livestock, since dogs attacking humans in urban cities is a very real issue.
It is. We've had, in fact, when I first came into the landscape to collect my information, we started scouting the primary healthcare center in Kaza, and we just wanted to have an idea about dog bites. And although we did not have consistent years, but overall, despite not having consistent years of data that we could collect, we did see an increase in the number of dog bite cases. So it was something that was happening. And as of now, we've not had human deaths, unlike Ladakh. But yes, people are afraid, especially when the dogs come in very large packs. It is impossible for one person to, manage that. There are people, when they go to the fields early in the morning, they'll have dogs over there, they'll hound them. Then they will call other people, throw stones, somehow manage to drive them away. So there are these cases that are happening. It is there. But yes, they all that they do is that they carry sticks with them, they carry stones with them to kind of just protect themselves from any of these. They will immediately start calling for people around them to, kind of help them. So you'll have another group of people coming in. And when the dogs see that there are more people coming in, then they probably start retreating. So till now, no deaths. But yes, there has been very bad cases of bites and harassment in general.
Could this also be a reason for the decreasing populations of herders?
The herder population is, of course, it is a challenge. I'm not sure whether it is a reason for their decrease. It is a challenge herding them, for sure. Even so, many of the herder populations, like herders whom I would interact with, they would say that, Madam, ये 15-20 कुत्ते आ जाते हैं, इनको कैसे भगाए? हम 2 जन हैं. So it's like that. So it is not because of dogs that people have not stopped herding. Okay, so what came out of my study are these real gray zones also. I cannot completely say that dogs are responsible for everything that is happening within the landscape. But the dogs came in because of certain things that happen within the landscape. And it would be very wrong on my part to say that dogs are doing everything also. Because lots of things have happened in the background to create a space for them to behave in this way also. And therefore, it's an emerging thing that has happened in the last 1 decade, largely. Especially the last 10 years, it has been difficult. From 2000, 3, 4 onwards, 2005 onwards, till the time when I was working, it has been a very difficult situation. But it is not because of dogs that people have quit herding or are going to quit herding. It's a part of their life also. So I don't know when that will come. Whether time will tell that or not, I am not sure.
Of course, right.
Yeah.
Thank you. You perfectly answered my question.
Thanks.
Do we have any more questions? Or I think Chandrima, can you stay longer, or is this already, we are way past our time?
Have we? Yeah, 5 minutes past our time. But yeah, I also had a nice time giving this talk, and I had some very nice questions also. So thank you for asking them.
Yes. We're not 5 minutes past, we are 20 minutes past the time.
Oh, really? Oh, shit. Okay.
No, that's great.
Oh, yeah, 6:30. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No,
I
but
thought it was 6:45.
No, it's great that also. It's just that it shows that how much of the people that they really were really interested in asking the question, and also
Yeah.
who were really thorough and in detail answering those questions. And it's also the interaction that makes it much more the
Rich.
topic rich. So
Yeah.
it is good to give some much more time even for the interaction. Thank you, Chandrima, for
Yeah,
doing this
thanks
today
so
for
much,
us.
Seema. Thank you for having me. And yeah, and good luck with all the next set of coexistence in practice talks as well. And I'm hoping to join.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining in today.
Thanks all.
Thank you everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.